Welcome back to another episode of A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci. I'm excited to launch another episode for you all. I'm Vincent Lanci, speaker and author of the book Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption. When I was 21 years old, I was the victim of a hit-and-run accident while walking home from a friend's birthday. After coming out of a coma and suffering from a traumatic brain injury, or you may know of as a TBI, I soon realized that it was time to put my mental health on a very high pedestal. This transformative experience has caused me to lead a podcast called All Things Mental Health. This All Things Mental Health podcast will feature mental health professionals, mental health influencers, and it would also hear mental health individuals speaking about their mental health stories because they want you to hear the issues they face and how they combat them. If you missed the last episode, be sure to download it after you tune in today. On this episode, I am happy to introduce Linda Murphy. Linda is a friend I met through networking on LinkedIn. She has an extensive mental health work experience that spreads over multiple organizations. She has an incredible journey and story for you all, so allow me to introduce Linda Murphy. Linda, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, would you mind please previewing your story a bit before we dive in and get going, and please share your role relating to mental health.
Sure. I am Linda Murphy, and I own the Relationship and Divorce Counseling Center in Tampa, Florida. I am a licensed mental health counselor, and I specialize in relationship-related issues. So I work with individuals who are going through divorces or breakups, as well as experiencing any issues with dating and other types of relationship problems within their lives. And then I also work with couples who are either wanting to get a divorce, on the verge of divorce, or just wanting to heal something in their relationship. So it's great. I love what I do, and I have two locations, one in Carrollwood and one opening up soon in South Tampa.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on the show, and I appreciate your preview. My goal of the show is to get as many perspectives on mental health as possible, and this would be the first on the show from this angle of your specialization, so I'm very, very excited to share that with our audience. And on each episode, Linda, I share the mental health story of someone who is famous because I want to let you, the listeners, know that you are not alone. I want you to understand that even though someone looks like they are healthy from the outside, they may not be on the inside too. As my guest area of focus is in infidelity, the mental health world story I will now introduce is of Tiger Woods. This was an interesting article because it discussed an individual's need for a sense of control and how it changes depending on what type of job or relationship you hold. Pro golf may represent the penultimate test of this emotional mastery in the world of sports. Many may remember Tiger Woods had that scandal many years back that involved cheating on his wife. He was found to have many mistresses, but didn't seem to be looking for an actual emotional intimacy with them. The article said that true romance and emotional intimacy with any of his mistresses, meant giving up some control. I also read that Tiger wasn't a hopelessly in love with another woman, yet more of a collector of girlfriends, and this allowed him to have control similar to on the golf course. Tiger wasn't the same mentally after this scandal, and his performance hadn't been the same, even though there were a lot of injuries as well. Linda, what did you take away most from Tiger Woods' story relating to mental health?
Well, it's interesting. I looked up a little bit more about Tiger Woods, and he was identified as having a sex addiction. And I don't know if you know this, but that's not an official diagnosis in the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. So it's not something that we can say is an official diagnosis, but it sounds like he definitely had some issues with sleeping around, right? And so I thought that the article pointing it out as a control issue was an interesting take on it. And I thought it might be interesting for listeners to hear what I might do if Tiger was my client. So Yeah, obviously I'm not his counselor and I don't know all the details. I don't even know much about golf. So, so I'm really just kind of brainstorming here. But anytime that somebody is doing a behavior like having sex with people and they're married and they do not want to be doing that, or are identifying it as something that they can't control, um, I always would look at, well, what is the motivation behind doing that, right? And the article identified it as a control issue. And I guess the common definition of how we normally use control issues is people who try to control a situation or circumstances or other people. And in this case, I would guess that Tiger is trying to control his own internal emotions, feelings, thoughts, that kind of stuff. And what I mean by that is that all of us have uncomfortable feelings that we experience. And with these uncomfortable feelings, we often will have behaviors that we use to try to not feel that way anymore. And so, for example, sometimes they could be deemed healthy behaviors, right? Like if you are stressed out at work, you might come home and tell your best friend about it on the phone, or you might call your mom, or you might go on a walk or take a long bath or something to kind of care for yourself. And if those behaviors are in line with the kind of life that you want to live, meaning you want to have connections with friends and stay healthy and, care for yourself in that way, then we deem those healthy, right? But when people have behaviors that aren't in line with what they care about, their values, like let's say that same person comes home from work after a stressful day, and instead of calling a friend, they drink 2 bottles of wine. That most likely is not in line with what they care about, right? It might cause health problems and it might cause a disconnect with family, friends, things that they care about. Maybe they're not taking care of their home like they'd like to. So when I look at Tiger Woods, I think that my guess would be most likely he had some uncomfortable thoughts and feelings. And he used sex as a way to make those feelings and thoughts temporarily go away. And if he could learn instead to identify what things trigger those behaviors, and identify what thoughts and feelings he is having, replacing the unhealthy behavior of sleeping with somebody with a healthy behavior would be a much better route to go. But also, if he could learn to sit with those uncomfortable feelings and thoughts and not try to just force them to go away, that would be a pretty valuable thing to be able to do.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate your insight as a professional standpoint. I believe I got that article off Psychology Today, and it just discussed the emotional control in romantic relationships and then how it
Mm.
transitioned over towards the career he had and he was so dominant. When I was growing up, Tiger Woods was the premier golfer, the video game guy, and then sometimes scandals. And when you lose focus, like you said, can kind of take you away from what's at stake. So thank you so much for that, Linda. And now it's time for the main event. On each episode, my guest and I will go over this series of 6 questions. By doing this, it allows me to deliver as much valuable as possible because it varies from influencers, doctors, and people talking about their mental health. So you ready to go?
Yes.
Excellent. Many would agree that the more common or at least talked about types of mental illnesses are mood disorders, anxiety disorders, or schizophrenia disorders. What areas do you come across the most in your practice?
I see a lot of depression and anxiety in my
Right.
clients, but for the most part, people coming for relationship related counseling aren't coming necessarily because they have a diagnosable
Mm-hmm.
mental illness. So there's something called an adjustment disorder, which is a diagnosis, meaning that somebody is having uncomfortable feelings like sadness or stress or anxiety, based off of having to adjust to a change in their life. And so sometimes I would say that that's probably the biggest diagnosable thing that I see in my office. But I actually don't take insurance because insurance requires that we diagnose clients in order for them to reimburse or pay for the sessions with counselors. And so I don't take insurance because of that, because a lot of my clients, they're coming because they're having a hard time communicating
Right.
with their spouse or their boyfriend or girlfriend, and that's not really something that all insurance companies are going to pay for. And so that's a choice I've made in my practice, not to accept insurance.
Yeah. So a lot of folks are coming to you for communication problems mainly, but you're saying that depression kind of stems if there had to be something, which kind of makes sense if you think about it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, people who are going through divorces or breakups, even, they may exhibit signs of depression, but is it a diagnosable? You know what I mean?
I
The
agree.
symptoms might be there, but it's really more adjusting to a change in life. And an insurance company might not see that as something they're going to pay for.
Yeah, I love the way you put that because I've spoken with one of my therapists in the past. There's a difference between being depressed and having a bad day, having something bad happening in your life. You have to adjust to that. So I love the way you put that because it's the truth. It's okay to be sad. It's normal. Sometimes things happen and
Yes.
you're not a
Yes.
robot.
And we don't have to escape those thoughts or feelings, right? Like they can be within us and we
Exactly.
can still live a good life.
And like you said before, Tiger kind of, temporarily getting rid of those feelings and suppressing those feelings and
Absolutely. And we all have these things that our mind has kind of taught us to do to feel better in these moments. And some of these things are really healthy and great for our lives. But oftentimes we do these things and we don't even realize we're doing them. And it can be helpful to have a counselor reflect that back to you, like, well, why are you doing that? Do you have to do that? Is that really what you want to be doing? And if you don't want to do that, what do you want to do instead? And can you sit with the feelings that might come because you make a different behavior choice?
absolutely. Well, I know you've been in the mental health world for a little bit. You've been across a few great organizations. When I originally started learning who you are, seeing if you'd be a great fit for the show, when did you first decide that a career relating to mental health in some regard was actually the right career for you to choose?
It's kind of a funny story. My sister had a friend at the time. I was a teacher for 10 years prior to becoming a counselor.
In Tampa?
Yeah. Yeah. In Hillsborough County, I was a middle school teacher.
I did Kelly Education Services for a few years in Hillsborough as well.
Oh, very cool.
Part time to try to make it because I enjoyed teaching and I've done the VIP Kid 950 classes one year and I enjoyed teaching, but it was a good way to make ends meet. So I was curious.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I loved teaching every minute of it. I loved the connection with the kids. Um, but it was always in the back of my mind that it would be cool to go into psychology in some way, shape, or form. But I never really put any real effort into that thought process. But my
Right.
sister at the time had a friend who was a mental health counselor, and he owned a private practice. And he would talk about how cool his job was, how flexible it was, how great it was to be working with people and helping them. And it just sounded amazing.
Right.
And so one day my sister comes to me and she's like, Linda, I'm going to go back to school to get my master's degree to become a mental health counselor. And it was like this aha epiphany moment. I
Right.
look at her and I go, me too. So we actually graduated around the same time. I actually beat her in graduating because I went back full time.
No
And
way. Wow.
yeah. And so we are now both mental health counselors. She counsels children, well, not children, I guess teens and adults on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum. So
Well, that's incredible. So you did the counseling and now you have your own thing. So across your experiences, across what you learned in school, maybe getting those degrees, those certifications, what advice can you give to our listeners as what may be considered potential early signs that they may be starting to develop some form of a mental illness?
well, there are so many different symptoms for each diagnosis.
Mhm.
So I feel like we could talk about this for an hour in itself.
Yeah.
But I wonder if you wouldn't mind me shaping that question to be more in line with like what I do,
Let's
right?
hear it. Yeah, let's hear it.
So like if you are, first of all, if you're an individual who is having any kind of relationship issue, meaning maybe you are dating the same kind of person over and over and over and it's just not working out for you. Or maybe you're finding that there's a pattern in the types of arguments that you are having with your partner. Or you're just, you're not able to keep a long-term relationship, right? You're not connecting with other people. It might be time to go to a counselor
Right.
just to see if there's something that can be done to help. I also recommend reading books on topics related to relationships and really just getting to know yourself better. So that's one thing that I would say is a sign that you might need to go see somebody.
Right. Yeah. All those things. So if those things start to happen again and again, those may be some early signs that this may not be going where you want it to go.
Yes, yeah. And that
Okay.
with just a little bit of help, it could make a huge difference.
Right. Right.
Pointing out the patterns that you have in life, in relationships. Like, are you choosing to date the same kind of woman over and over and over? And it's like, we can break that pattern if we can really learn what it is and what's happening there and where it came from, right?
Yeah. And you
So
said
that's
something.
one. Yeah,
You
that's
said something
one.
before where you're saying reading these, reading ways to improve yourself. So you're kind of segueing yourself, which is great, into I need to hear from your perspective 3 important things our listeners can do on a daily basis to improve their overall mental health.
You know, the 3 things I would definitely say would be exercise. That's always good for your mental health. If you're
I
not
love that.
feeling good, yeah, go out and take a walk. It doesn't have to be anything strenuous, but
Hmm.
strenuous can also be helpful as long as you're not being abusive to yourself,
Well, I'm
right?
glad you said that because that's been coming up on a few episodes where exercising, working out, even lifting weights may be more beneficial for your mind, your mental health than just your physical health. And people don't even put 2 and 2 together. But if you pay attention to it, it's true.
Yeah, I mean, our bodies are meant to be doing these kinds of movements. And
Right.
so you can imagine if you're just sitting still and sitting at a desk all day, that your body and your mind are not going to be very happy.
I've been there.
The other thing I would say is, of course, I'm sure you've heard this a million times, eat a healthy diet.
Right. Exercising, healthy diet. They aren't just
Yeah.
cliche. They are said a lot for a reason because they do make all the difference. And people will say you are where you eat sometimes. And if you have a consistently bad diet, consistently bad mood, maybe.
Right, right. And again, we go back to those uncomfortable thoughts and feelings. People oftentimes will use food just like they use drugs, alcohol, or
Oh,
sex,
yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
To feel better. And if that's happening for you, then you can kind of look at that behavior and hopefully make that change. And then the last thing that I would say is having a good social support system.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Valuable. Yeah, I mean, I, one of the things that I always try to help my clients to recognize is how important it is that they have people in their lives that care about them and they care, vice versa. We are bonding mammals, right? We are not meant to be alone.
Right.
A way to torture somebody is to separate them from other human beings, right? It was it the movie The Shining where the guy was
I
in
think it was.
the hotel, right? And he went nuts because he's by himself. So having a support system is amazing. Going to that support system for everyday issues, for fun, for help, whatever it is, can be so good for your mental health. And so that would be my third thing to do.
Those are all wonderful ones, and I'm sure people will start to incorporate them after this episode. And now let's move into some longer term commitments our listeners can start to make to create an overall healthier mindset.
Okay. So we've talked about it throughout the whole podcast, and that is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? Yeah, I consider this a superpower for people to be able to experience anxiety, experience depression, experience stress, and not react with an unhealthy behavior, which it is a superpower to be able to do that. We will all experience these uncomfortable feelings in our life. There's actually 9 core feelings that human beings experience: love, joy, curiosity, anger, fear, sadness, guilt, shock, and disgust. And if you look at those 9 core feelings, most people would identify only 3 of them as being enjoyable or feelings that they'd actually want to feel. And the reality is that, if you look in any magazine or you watch any, daytime talk show, everybody is talking about how to feel happy. Well, that's only one of the 9.
Mm-hmm.
You can't live in that state. It comes and it goes just like all the other feelings. And when that feeling comes, everybody wants to hold on to it, but it goes, right? You can't hold on to happiness. You can't hold on to joy all the time, or we'd be walking around looking crazy, right? With big smiles on our face all the time. But these other feelings that we have, anxiety, depression, anger, sadness, guilt, shock, all these other feelings that come through us, they also come and go.
Very true.
And so, when they come, we don't have to do a behavior to get rid of them or to try to get rid of them. We can really just experience them in the wave of how they come in and how they go, just like any other feeling. And so that's the number one thing that I would suggest and that I work with my clients on is just, hey, you don't have to react to that feeling or that thought. We all get those. They're normal. They're part of life. And not only that, but they're often linked to things that we really care about, right? We wouldn't be so anxious. I wouldn't be so anxious about, this podcast interview today if I didn't care
Right. Well
about,
said.
making sure that I sound like a normal human being, right? And so, we can point back to that anxiety and go, I don't want that to be there. But if it wasn't there, most likely I wouldn't have prepared myself and made sure that I was in the right state of mind to be on this podcast today. And what would that mean? It would mean I probably wouldn't have done a good job. And, who wants that? So that's the number one thing. The other thing is know thyself. I say this all the time. You have to get to know who you are as a human being and what your strengths and weaknesses are and what your triggers are huge. In especially in relationships, if you know what things your partner can do that might bother you, not only can you inform your partner about that, and hopefully they can avoid doing things that could bother you, but also when you do get triggered, you can realize, oh, there I am getting triggered again, and maybe respond to it in a way that's a little bit healthier for your relationship. So those are my two things.
Yeah, I like how if you know thyself, you know how to avoid certain things, and you can work with yourself on not making it a limitation, but just we're learning to grow around it. So that was great. But what are some ways you plan on raising awareness for the importance of mental health in the future? You have anything lined up, or what's going on?
I want to mention this because it is in the
Please.
works. I will probably be starting. I say will probably because I've been working on it for about a year, but I do have plans on having my own podcast coming up soon.
Cool.
It will be called My Best Friend's a Counselor, and I'm hoping to get it started sooner than later. My goal is to actually answer listeners' questions about relationships, and in the hopes of spreading information about relationships, and also, my own clients might benefit from hearing what other people are going through and seeing that they're not alone in this.
You're 100% right. I don't remember which episode it was, but it came up where if I had come into contact with more people talking about traumatic brain injuries and what they went through, the dividends it would have paid would have been priceless. As you hear from doctors of this may happen, but so may this, and if I was with,
Yeah.
so that's a great service you'd be doing to everybody, and I hope you let me know so I can help promote it for you and spread the good word that you are doing, because it will help people hearing your stories. I agree.
Thank you, Vincent.
Absolutely. But thank you for coming on. I know our listeners can see all the value you put into this episode today. I really, really liked how the advice you gave to our listeners for the relationships, where if you saw what was going on, you can prevent it. So
Yes.
it's very simple, and I like the things when people make them simple because that makes it tactical at times. But it is time for the last word, and I do this on my other podcast called What It's Really Like to Be an Entrepreneur as well, because I want our listeners to really get to know my guests. Is there something that you want to share with our listeners that we'd not get to touch on today?
I think we did touch on it slightly, and that was that a lot of people think that they have to have a diagnosed mental illness to go to counseling, or that things have to be extreme before they go. And I suggest don't wait. Don't wait until it gets too much. Especially in couples counseling, people often come at the point where it's almost too late, right? They have to go to couples counseling in order to save their relationship. Whereas if they had come 5 or 6 years earlier when things were just starting to get rocky, some things could have been prevented. And so whether you're coming for individual counseling or couples counseling, I highly suggest don't wait until it's too late. Try it out. And also having somebody that you can go to in just in case,
Right.
right? Like that person where, hey, I think things might start to get hard in my life. I'm going to come to you so that I always have somebody to contact if I need help.
I think it's very important to try to prevent almost everything. Even if I'm getting sick, I feel like I'll take medicine too early. I
Yes,
think everything is better if you just attack it, get it out of the way.
proactive.
In a separate scenario, I think I've learned a lot within the business world. People avoid confrontation, which in turn just creates more confrontation. It builds up, builds up, builds up. And if you just said, "Hey, I don't have time," or "Hey, it can't work," right away, no harm done. Thanks for not wasting my time. So
Right.
everything, that's a great way to put it. But Linda, would you mind sharing your website or ways for our listeners to request your services, follow your endeavors, maybe try to get on that podcast you're about to start up now?
Absolutely. So I have a website. It is radcounseling.com. RAD stands for Relationship and Divorce Counseling. So again, that's radcounseling.com. And people can email me at linda@radcounseling.com. And also they're welcome to give me a call if they'd like to set up an appointment at 813-444-8894.
8894. Thank you for sharing all that, Linda. Everyone listening on, please feel free to contact her and definitely check out her website. But be sure to check out the show on Instagram and Facebook at A Mental Health Break and on Twitter at Podcasts by Lanci. I'm at Vincent A. Lanci on all social media and YouTube, and my website is vincentalanci.com. Be sure to check out my book, Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption, on Amazon now, but be sure to DM me or email me. I would like to hear what you think. If you like today's episode, please continue listening and rate A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci 5 stars. I work very hard to find value delivering stories for you on each episode. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you all in the next episode of A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci.